identified from a young age as an anarchist, and during that time, the popularity of anarchism has fallen and risen. And I wonder if your core philosophy, your anarchism, has evolved or changed during the course of your life.
Well, it's not what it was when I was 10 years old, but fundamentally not. But that's because the core philosophy just seems to me like common sense. I don't see how anybody can not accept it. So, the core principles, as far as I understand it, anarchism covers an extremely wide range, and all sorts of, you can't encapsulate it in formulas, but it seems to me there is a sort of a thread that runs through it, and it is basically skepticism about any form of authority or domination or submission or whatever. And the basic idea is that domination and hierarchy are not self-justifying. They have to justify themselves. There's a burden of proof to bear. And if they can't justify themselves, they should be dismantled. And that covers everything from personal relations to international affairs. And then out of that come various varieties of anarchism, depending on what exactly you're looking for in the future. What are the alternatives to authority, and so on. But almost everything decent in human life seems to me to fall under that. So no, that hasn't changed.
Well, the tendency of anarchism, which I guess you subscribe to, of anarcho-syndicalism, overlaps fairly closely with council communism around this notion of worker councils. And for the public at large, the assumption is that an anarchist society would be one where people ran amok, where there is chaos. That's
the propaganda. Actually, anarchist views are mostly of highly organized societies.
So what would that society look like, a society of worker councils?
Worker councils, I think, should be one component of it. So it means in any institution, say a university or a factory or whatever it is, the participants would run it. They'd run it through councils in which people participate and make decisions. Actually, it's not unlike a faculty, which is about as close to this model as you get in our world, where it's, there are outside controls, but pretty much the faculty makes decisions about what happens internally. Actually, one of the things that makes university life appealing, much more so than higher paid professions, is that you're running your own life to a large extent. I mean, there are duties, but they're supposed to be shared, and shared by common agreement. And you may decide to work 80 hours a week, but it's the 80 hours that you pick, and it's the topics that you choose to work on, and it comes out of kind of like an inner need rather than external compulsion. And I think that's the kind of model everything should turn towards. So worker councils would be one component of a freely organized society, but they'd have to interact with others. So an institution, say a factory, whatever it is in a community, and the community should have a comparable form of self-organization and self-management, and then they have to interact. And it's complex interactions because many people are parts of a lot of them. As an anarchist society, the kind that I think is desirable would develop, it would have to deal with quite concrete problems about the nature of self-government, the nature of administration. Do you want to distribute jobs so that they're fixed, or do you want circulation of responsibilities and actions? And there's no simple answer to that. Like, you want people to be trained as surgeons, let's say. On the other hand, you don't want all the dirty work done by a special category of people. So that has to be worked out. Distribution of job functions and interactions between different forms of what should be voluntary association. And there are many other problems, like what happens if somebody doesn't want to be part of take on the responsibilities of a community. I mean, those are problems that exist in any society, and they would exist in a different form in a more free society. And at this point, you have lots of different ideas. So there are people, basically anarchists, who think that payment, what you earn from your work, should be proportional to effort. There are others who think that's not an appropriate model, that it should be independent of effort. I tend toward the latter, but most of my friends tend toward the former. So, but these are real questions, and they're innumerable ones.
Well, thinking about the road to a stateless society, an anarchist society, you have written that you believe that radicals should defend those gains which have been fought for by people that are embodied in the state, such as social security, such as progressive taxation. Other anarchists might argue that this holds people within the kind of paternalistic grip of the state. Why do you come down where you do on this?
You have to ask what the alternatives are. I mean, many anarchists just consider the state the fundamental form of oppression. I think that's a mistake. I mean, of the various kinds of oppressive institutions that exist, the state is among the least of them. The state, at least, to the extent that the society is democratic, various degrees and types, but to the extent that it's democratic, you have some influence on what happens in the state. You have no influence on what happens in a corporation. They're real tyrannies. And as long as society is largely dominated by private tyrannies, which is the worst form of oppression, people just need some form of self-defense. And the state provides some form of self-defense. So to say, well, let's dismantle Social Security means concretely let's decide that disabled widow across town will starve to death. And,